And how's it going, everyone? And welcome to No Fun Allowed. Today, you are joined by a very special guest, Strawberry.
What's up, memers?
And Strawberry, of course, is the meme lord of the Curse of Strahd community. So, not only is she a meme lord, but she's also someone that's spending a bit of time researching, documenting, and is a totally non actual historian on Ireena. The reason I brought Strawberry on today is because I wanted to talk about Ireena and her impact in the game and who she is and all that, because I find that she is truly fascinating. She is in a tremendous part of the Curse of Strahd history, and yet if you crack open that 5th edition book there, you get 2 sentences. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about that. So, Strawberry, to kick this whole thing off, I wanted to ask you a simple question. Who is Ireena Kolyana?
That's a wonderful question, but the question we should be asking is how is Ireena Kolyana? Because this book is not nice to her.
I
I don't
mean,
think
yeah.
any game is nice to her.
Oh, yes.
But Ireena Kolyana is the daughter of the burgomaster of the first place they visit. And she is essentially an important piece of the Curse of Strahd module structure because she gets the ball rolling. Her quest to go to Vallaki essentially brings the party to a metropolitan style subway system. Once you get to Vallaki, you can go anywhere. So she is important to the beginning structure. Oh yeah, and I guess she's also like Strahd's temping over her, but that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of pretty much the gist that we get in that book. We get the following information: brother of this guy that you meet in town, and the daughter of the burgomaster, but not really the blood daughter. And Strahd is, yes, in fact, simping over her, and that's pretty much the all the information we get right from the beginning. So yes, her catalyst in this campaign is a tremendous deal because it really comes down to the group that you're running and how you portray her. Is she
Yeah.
a quest hub that your players, drive through this entire campaign as, going from place to place, location to location? Is she someone that must be defended at all cost as Strahd tries to, advance on her? There's a lot of things to consider. And of course, in that Discord and in the Reddit, we see a lot of people portray Ireena as some way or another, and the players just don't pick up on that, and Ireena just falls to the wayside, which I find, kind of, it doesn't suck per se. It obviously comes, on a
Yeah.
player by player and group by group basis, but I certainly think that her inclusion in this campaign can be fascinating, and it really, really comes down to first impressions and, her personality and what your players are trying to get out of this module. So
Absolutely.
so your players meet up with Ireena and get told, hey, the village of Barovia is not safe. You're 2 feet away from Strahd's castle. Maybe Vallaki is safe because they've got walls and it sounds like things are happy there. So we get, of course, even more information about Ireena once we get to Vallaki, that she is actually the real brother of a terrible, nasty person inside. So where does Ireena come from?
Yeah, so that's a good point. And Ireena is like an onion, if we're gonna quote one of the best movies of all time. She has layers. On the outside, Ireena, when she starts the game, thinks that she's just the burgomaster's daughter and brother to this super cool NPC that I totally don't have a crush on, Ishmark. And then she goes to Vallaki, and her world is kind of shattered when she realizes, oh, that's not my dad. He's not my brother. My brother's actually this psychopath. And then the layers are peeled even more back, and it's revealed, oh, Strahd has actually been chasing people like me for literal centuries. And there's some interesting things you can do with that. The idea that her world is crumbling around her from all these different secrets she's figuring out and trying to just be stable throughout the entire module is the goal of Ireena, basically, just trying to find a stable location, both like physically and emotionally.
And do you believe that when she arrives to Vallaki and, of course, finds out that her brother is the man that he is, Ezek, that Vallaki can be a place like that?
With Father Lucian, maybe, but definitely not with Isaac, because Isaac steals Ireena, which is that's an interesting thing the module does. And we're gonna touch on Kresk later, because oh boy, Kresk.
Oh, yes,
But the
Karesk.
module, because it's a gothic horror, things aren't supposed to go right. So in either Kresk or Vallaki, the there's a consequence to bringing her there, and a sort of there's no safe place she can really be in Barovia. That's kind of the prevailing theme throughout the entire book. Like in Vallaki, you think she's cool because the church, and Father Lucian is like, actually, no, the church isn't safe. And also, that guy's gonna kidnap you later.
Yeah, so through all these trials and all these times, your Ireena is forced alongside the party because she needs to try and find somewhere safe. But obviously, we know that nowhere is safe in the lands of Barovia because this is Strahd's land, and he can do whatever the heck he wants. So, how does living in this world shape Ireena? What is her personality?
Well, if we look at the book, her personality, I've looked through this book multiple times. This is the one actual description of her personality. This is the sentence. She appears mild. She has a strong will, and she aids the party as best she can in saving herself. The role-playing Ireena section is actually the this is the detailed Ireena's gonna exposition dump to the party. And here's a little personality bit. Like, and it's mild but also strong-willed. What does that mean? Most people
Mild.
don't even know what the word mild means. Are we talking about a sauce?
Is Ireena spicy or is she mild?
What
Oh
type of honey
no.
mustard is she using?
So, yeah,
But
we obviously get this incredible lack of information for someone that is a humongous focal point for this whole module. So, what best thing what best should we do to go ahead and expand upon her personality? Do you feel?
the DM should mold the personality first off into something the DM wants to play. Because if you don't like playing Ireena, buddy, she's gonna be here the entire time. You need to like playing her. And something else I think that has worked with Ireena's in parties is that it's kind of molded in a way so that the party will like her. So for example, the group I'm currently running for, we play all our games together. So I know them very well. I know what they like. They like a strong, feisty woman with some layers and just someone who's genuinely nice. It is going to help them. So having Ireena kind of work with the party is your best way to go, oh, we might want to keep you around more and not abandon you immediately. But of course, that doesn't really work when anytime I roll Ireena, it's terrible. Chris Perkins is saying no. The dice god, Chris Perkins, is telling me no, we don't like what you're doing.
Well, I mean, if you watch Dice Camera Action, you discover that in Chris Perkins' rendition of Curse of Strahd, Ireena got killed relatively early on. So maybe he's just
Yeah.
imparting that on everyone else.
Yeah, I think you bringing up dice camera action is important because Perkins himself adds a lot of homebrew.
Oh,
I think
yes.
there's a misconception with modules that you have to stay 100% on the line. And look, we respect what Twice Bitten is doing here. I do. But you don't have to stick all the way on the line with Ireena. You can mold anything in the module to what you need it to be.
Absolutely. Like Chris Perkins himself, he's told multiple people, he even told me personally, that you should change that module because anyone can run that module, but you can only run your module. And no one else gets that privilege. So I think it is important that, it is important that we get a solid structure of a story, but at the same time, it should be malleable. It should be something that you can go ahead and change to your own desires and wills because you know your party best. Hopefully, you do. So you're going to be able to change the story as you desire. And much like you said that your party doesn't like a mild character, whatever the heck that means. They want a spicy character. So make her spicy, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty much in the same boat with you. Like, if I want an NPC to truly stick around with the party, they have to have some sort of defining character about them, not just generic. I don't like. No one wants to hang around with the wallflower, right? They want someone that
Yeah.
truly like stands out. It could be in good ways, it could be in bad ways, but being completely average and mundane, that just gets old real quick.
And something, so what do we do then is the question of what if you're new with your party? What if you're new DMing and you don't know your party that well? That's where Ishmark, as much as I love him, I purposely made Ishmark have less of a character in my campaign to prop up Ireena's character. Ishmark's character was essentially, I love my sister so much. I love her. I want to protect her. And that allowed Ireena chances to be more rebellious. Like, one of the moments my party loved is when they were traveling and went to the Vistani Tesser Falls, and she like took a swig of alcohol from behind his back as like a sort of defiance. Because the entire time he's like, Ireena, don't drink, don't do it. She like, nah, man. So having Ishmark have less of a character can help prop her up.
For sure. When if you're running it, as written-ish, where your players arrive to the village of Barovia first, then the only characters they're going to be interacting with are the Vistani woman and Ismark and the father at the church, and that's pretty much only the people that are willing to talk to them in that town. So, showing that disposition of people that have personalities or don't have personalities can certainly make Ireena shine. Uh, Another thing to consider too is the fact that Ireena is, as written, your players don't, she doesn't seek them out. Basically, they have to interact with, Ismark first, which can be a little bit strange depending on, circumstances that you have, where your players just show up to town and then this guy says, "Oh, hey, want to help me out? Oh, and by the way, here's my sister." It really comes down to your style of DMing, your style of storytelling, but perhaps there is more of a sense that you could have, the rebellious Ireena that, says, "Screw you, I'm going to go ahead and, meander around town and talk to people and do things," right? Entirely
Yeah.
up to you if you want to make her more outgoing. So, speaking of making Ireena, this other type of person, what are the different versions of Ireena?
So from my research, I've gathered there are three different ways people genuinely play Ireena, and I put little nice names to them. So there's the warrior, the speaker, and the navigator. The warrior is strong-willed, really takes that strong-willed personality with just general things. She's the one who fights. She's the strong, independent woman. .tm. She's gonna probably make fights with the party and be very willed. This is She's one of the more likely ones that your party is gonna not like immediately, but she's got a nice soft exterior, an interior. Once you peel back the layers, and then the speaker. uses her word instead of fighting, really uses that noble ground sheet that she has. There's a really great post on the Curse of Strahd subreddit from Guild's Bounty on how to run Ireena this way. So just gonna tell you, look at that post because it's amazing. Go check out all their other work too. And the Navigator, which is the third one, which I don't think people realize they run her as this, but she's navigating the party to different places, like to Vallaki and then to Kresk, and she's dropping exposition about the world and future plot points in Isaac and Strahd. She's like she's a compass. She's telling them where to go in a very subtle way.
Yeah, so in regards to that, you have, these different versions of Ireena, and whether she be, more upfront or more, navigatey or whatever else in between, right? She truly can, shape the storytelling of your entire campaign. But mind you, is that she may influence the storytelling of your campaign, but not in a direct way, maybe in a very, very indirect way, because your players could decide to not interact with her at all, and then that'll obviously change some things up, because Strahd, will be able to do whatever he wants to do. Ireena will be doing what she wants to do, and that will have drastic ramifications. So when you are running Ireena in all these multitude of ways, what do you feel like, this adds or possibly even detracts from the campaign?
Well, those three like different ways a reader's run should be your base work. You should decide, okay, this is how Ireena is going to work as a plot point. But everything in her life should then define the rest of her personality. There's a lot you can do with Ireena's past of loss. She doesn't know who her mother is. The module sure doesn't. If you decide to make her friends with Duro, I've seen a lot of people do that, and that's really a good idea. And then her losing Duro and then finding out, oh, my childhood friend is now a vampire spawn. Oh no! Her father obviously dies because of the wolves attacking her, and there's a good little subplot you can have of her feeling like this is maybe her fault, that maybe if she had just gave herself to Strahd, everything would be fixed, that maybe there is a reason she's experiencing all this loss. I don't remember if this is a community thing or a strictly book thing, but the idea that red hair brings bad luck and she's experiencing all this bad luck in her life, you can play with that. Of her being a beacon of misfortune.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea that when your players show up and they find, the burgomaster's dead, he died because of a heart attack, because, for days on end the house has been being assaulted. And mind you, that isn't, Strahd actively trying to get to Ireena, because in reality, he could just do whatever the heck he wanted. He could just go ahead and just, whisk her away. He's doing that to soften her up. And like you said, right, that could be part of the mentality of, maybe she starts thinking to herself, oh, if I had just given myself up, then dear old dad would still be alive. And that probably is what Strahd is thinking. So it does make sense that he would try to weaken her mentally over time, because, that'll truly shape her character. And that's where your players come in. Are they going to be able to go ahead and lend a helping hand? Or are they not going to help, and then she's just going to say, well, screw you all, I guess. I'm just going to do my own thing.
Yeah, it's a really easy way for the characters to have like a one-on-one conversation with her. Of, hey, Ireena, what's up? You want to talk? You've been feeling kind of bad. I don't know if it's because everywhere we go, there's misfortune everywhere, but it's not your fault. Obviously, they'll say it better than that, but
Hey, it's
it's
me, your
it's
boy.
nice for them. It's nice for them to be like, I'm gonna help Ireena.
Yeah, and that will truly show off the type of both players and player characters you have, because there are some players that hop into a role playing
Mhm.
module and don't role play. They just are just murder hobos and they just don't care.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna quickly realize, like, okay, is this gonna work out or not? And then the same as well, not only the players but also the player characters. Do you have a certain PCs that maybe have a certain feeling toward Ireena because they experience the same thing, or maybe they want to pull Ireena up and say, hey, get tough or whatever. You can have so many different ideas on how to actually approach, trying
Yeah.
to get Ireena up and back into the world, that it really will determine, the course of whatever it is your group gets up to.
Yeah, that's why I think the Ireena and Ishmark relationship can work so well as a first character setting moment because everyone either has a sibling, has a younger sibling, or is protective of someone, or knows what it's like to try and break out of that older protective shell of someone. Like, that's a very relatable first plot point before you sink into the everyone's dying around me and I'm being chased by my ex-vampire boyfriend.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And that whole theme of being chased around by technically her spirit's ex, not Ireena or herself's ex, but
yeah,
that whole idea of like trying to escape fate is a huge component of this whole campaign and module. Your players get introduced to fate through the Taroka deck. Strahd is trying to overcome his fate that he is trying to find someone to love, but of course he's doomed to not have that. And Ireena's trying to
yeah,
escape her fate of getting the heck out of here, which she can't. So
yeah. Speaking more on that point, there's an aspect that you can run with Ireena and Strahd's relationship that the before I preface this statement, you have to be very careful about this, and you can run her with symptoms of a survivor of abuse because Strahd did some pretty bad things to her. He basically did the real life equivalent of violating her in a not so good way. And if you're gonna implement these character traits, I definitely recommend looking it up. When I said I'm gonna implement some of these aspects, I spent like days on end researching what it's like to survive from something like this. And the one thing I learned is that subtlety is key. So you could have her be more comfortable with the female characters of the party, be less distant from the male ones, um, not want to share a room with any of the other male characters. Or something that I really was a really good scene is her being uncomfortable with other members of the party using enchantment magic because that's the same magic Strahd used on her. So there was this really good moment at the beginning of the campaign where I don't remember what specifically led to it, but it's Curse of Strahd. Player characters are distrustful towards each other. And so the wizard character cast an enchantment spell on the rogue character to basically get her to tell him something about her backstory. And Ireena was in the room. She was very obviously uncomfortable with it. And that can be, she could, a more strong-willed Ireena could have been like, yo, why did you do that? But she just very calmly went up to him and said, hey, don't do that in front of me. I don't like that. And it
I'm
was a really good humanizing moment.
I mean, I don't know about you, but if someone waved their hand and all of a sudden I started speaking about things, I'd kind of be peeved too. It
Yeah.
is a very important idea. The idea of the consent that you have with your players of, are certain themes introduced in regards of assault and bad words that I don't want to say out loud, right?
Yeah.
It is very important that you be on the same wavelength on what is acceptable at your table, what isn't acceptable, and if it is acceptable, how far you go. The idea of Strahd, assaulting Ireena is a pretty tremendous deal because It seems like just a powerless situation that Ireena can't do anything about, and Strahd is portrayed as a monster. And mind you, this is a good way, air quote, good way. This is certainly a way to make sure that Strahd appears as a monster to the players and ensures that he is the villain of the campaign. Because if you leave that out, then perhaps your players have a different concept of what's going on here. But if you make it first and foremost that Strahd is doing these terrible things, then hopefully your players don't have any sympathy for this guy. And if they do have any sympathy for this guy, then that is an easy indication that you need to start DMing for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea of Ireena trying to, she is a survivor. She is she's a victim. These things can be really tough to play out if you don't have a group that's comfortable with it. If you're not comfortable with it, if you don't know about it, it's really tough, and not something to be taken lightly. It absolutely shouldn't
Yeah.
be. That's kind of the important thing about this whole thing.
Yeah, it's about how dark you're making the actual module. Because the original module has dark themes and darker undertones. It's if you drag those undertones more to the surface is the problem there. And I know some people are like, well, why would you include trigger warnings to your group if they're gonna be spoiled? Because that's important to communicate to your players. You can't just pull out the one of the main NPCs is gonna be surviving trauma just out of the hat, especially if you don't know your group that well. You gotta communicate with them.
Yeah, I mean, between the discords and the subreddit, we've definitely heard the horror stories of DMs introducing something that they thought was perfectly acceptable, but obviously wasn't when it came to the individual players. I think a more common one that gets introduced, of course, is kids getting eaten. There are certainly
Yeah.
some people that do not take kindly to that because of whatever they've experienced in their life. Whether they have kids or even suckier things have happened. So that I find that's definitely like something that comes up a lot more often. But I think a lot of DMs also kind of glance over the whole assault of Ireena thing. But the ones that do bring it up, you have to be, of course, you have to temper
I
it.
don't blame them as
Yeah.
well for not really addressing it because
Oh man.
the module kind of also brushes past it. It's just sort of like, yeah, he went here, he bit her twice. How did that happen? She doesn't know. That's almost like more terrifying than the book is addressing it in.
Yeah. I mean, I
She
mean,
doesn't know what happened.
yeah. I mean, as you mentioned before, like with the whole someone in your party casting a spell, like in the D&D universe, charm spells are, very, very, like, if charm spells existed in our world, that'd be illegal, right? Like, you would not be able to
Yes.
persuade other people to do things. That's just, it's immoral, it's just wrong, it's creepy, it's
Yeah.
sadistic, it's all these terrible things. And in fact, actually, we get a glimpse of that later on in Vallaki. We get the idea that Victor used magic
Yeah.
on a girl and drove her literally insane through these magics because he was literally,
Yes.
toying with her mind in a very
Yeah. The
perverse way.
book specifically says that he enchanted he enchanted his two test subjects into going on to the portal,
Mm-hmm.
which I personally removed because I feel like Ireena would not like Victor at all.
Well, I mean, I feel like as written, Victor is also an irredeemable
Yeah.
character, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah, this isn't the Victor talk. I wish it was.
That's a story for another day, of course. So, so in regards of that, the Ireena thing, Ireena, of course, as written, is only like what two paragraphs in the whole dang book, but she's this tremendous deal. But what impact does she have on the story of this module as a whole, do you feel?
She has a giant impact, and that is because her and Ishwark are the first NPCs the party is probably going to be introduced to. This was different because in my game, Morgantha was the first NPC they were introduced to. But essentially, Ireena and Ishrak are going to be the first good aligned NPCs. And I argue 100% that Ireena is the most important good aligned character in the entire module. She gets the ball rolling and she's vital in just the party seeing how bad Strahd is. You mentioned before that him doing what he did to Ireena helps the party gain some context. The rest of her character is going to give more context as to how bad he is.
Absolutely, you know, and this module in particular really sets itself apart from every other module because in most modules the villain is acting through agents. You never meet the villain because in most D&D games, if you see a villain, you can kill a villain, and you always hit the trope of, you know, teleporting away. Curse of Strahd is so unique in that the villain is so upfront because he does act through agents, of course, but he is in the party's face multiple times and, of course, is impacting what could be a major NPC that joins the party the whole time. So it is important to understand that context of, you know, who is Strahd, you know, what is he doing, what is his motivations, because your players might not be able to understand all of that immediately, but they will get glimpses of it. And especially if that is their first introduction of they don't even know this guy's name, and the first thing they discover is Ireena telling about this guy, you know, showing up and doing what he did. That is gonna immediately give your players these expectations, and they're gonna immediately say, "Oh yeah, screw that dick."
Yes. What's even without Strahd's presence being there, the fact that nobody else who is evil will even attempt to attack Ireena set the precipice of how much power Strahd has over the entire land. If no one's going to attack Ireena because that's his object.
Yeah, and once again, that can show how possessive of a character Strahd is, and also personify the land. I think one of the best ways to show that off is immediately after leaving the village of Barovia, have some wolves attack the party, and have it painfully obvious that the wolves literally run past Ireena and attack someone else, and make
Yeah,
it so that yeah,
yeah, one of my favorite moments is my party decided to attack the hags at Bone Grinder, and Ireena was situated in a place where Bella would be able to hit the one of the hag's daughters, by the way, if you don't have a universal knowledge of the book like I do. Had the perfect spot to hit so many people with one of her lightning bolts, but Ireena was in front of her, so she didn't. And that immediately told the party, that's weird. What's going on? I also think it's if you have a more like combat oriented party, that's a good way to get them interested in Ireena. Be like, oh, we can pull some cool like tactics using Ireena.
and I think that can definitely be fun, and it also can lead down a slippery slope of the
Yes.
party also using Ireena in their own, you know, way, not necessarily perverse, of course, but you know, using her, and that still can, you know, lead to certain themes and ideas, and that'll certainly, you know, impact Ireena's thought process on, man, are these people just using me? Like, you know, am I just getting used by everyone here? I think that can prove very interesting depending on the group of players that you have. It really does come down to the group of players that you have at the end of the day. You know, if
The
you
wonderful aspect of Ireena is how often she's with the party. The party can have a bunch of things with her, and she can have a bunch of scenes with them. I think the reason people love Esmeralda so much is because the party can meet her multiple times, multiple things can happen, multiple scenarios. The same thing can happen with Ireena. Like maybe while you're off in the wagon, she's like, "Hey guys, maybe stop using me in battle."
yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it is important that she steps up because if she doesn't say anything, then your players are going to keep on doing whatever it is that they think is most advantageous to them because that's what players do. People just do whatever they think is best. And if you set forth this notion that, oh yeah, if there's an enemy, whatever, have Ireena hold the door, then you're gonna certainly get into situations where Ireena's gonna be pissed, because once again, I'd be pissed if someone grabbed me and said, "Hey, hold the door," because we know for a fact that they're not gonna attack you. That'd get real old real quick. And once again, that is definitely something that can definitely creep up over time. Maybe the first time she sees this happen, she doesn't say anything. The second time, she kind of bites her lip. And then maybe the third time, that's when she's like, all right, assholes.
So subtle body language allows the chance for the characters to talk. Because sometimes when the DM has an NPC walk up to the party, it sounds like the DM is talking to you right now. You need to pay attention to this in-game cutscene. But if they take the effort to talk first after seeing her little moments of discomfort, that makes Ireena go, oh, they actually do care about my concerns.
Yeah, and communication is key. It sucks because like of course there is a lot of those times where the players feel like the DM is talking to the players, not the NPCs talking to the PCs. You do have to find that fine line of where that stops and where that ends, because I find that once you find where those barriers are, then you can definitely tell a more cohesive story and make it a lot more less biased or less driven, because some people might think that you have these perceptions. Something that, of course, comes up a lot of time is a lot of players might feel like Ireena is a sort of DMPC, which she shouldn't be played as, I don't think. I think you should have a clear-cut goals and motivations and all that, and not have her just be another person in the group, like another party member. She should be her own separate entity, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the word DM's PC gets tossed around anytime there's a character that's following the party.
Yep.
Like, just because a character's following the party doesn't mean they're a DM PC.
Yeah, I mean,
And Curse of Strahd definitely has a lot of potential DM PCs. And it's your job as the DM to go, this is too many DM PCs. I need to keep them somewhere else.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in D&D's universe, or I mean, not universe, in D&D's history, at one point, the adventuring party was a literal troop, right? You'd have your retainers and followers, the armor bearers, the cooks, the chefs, the horse bearers. You'd have all these people. And it was very awesome because if any PC died, then you can go ahead and just, grab one of them and run them. But slowly over time, we started losing that. We started transforming from this huge traveling caravan down to now it is in 5th edition, where we typically only find that, it's a 4-person group, and that's it. And that has something to do with mechanics, of course, because, PCs got a lot better. But it also sucks because a lot of times you feel like you as a DM want some NPC to tag along with the party so that you can go ahead and talk to them in-game versus, once again, PC to NPC versus DM to player.
Yeah.
And
a lot of the potential Curse of Strahd DMPCs are really good characters.
yeah.
The reason they're the DMPCs the majority of the time is the party wants to see more of that character, that's why I'm so perplexed with Ireena.
Yeah,
That we're even having this conversation right now.
Yeah, I mean it's tough, whether that be because people don't want to portray, those hardcore elements that we talked about previously, or it's because, for example, a lot. I promise you, if you went did a big old survey about, people DMing whatever, guys probably aren't as comfortable as at DMing girls, right? I'm willing to bet
Absolutely.
that's the case.
Yeah, I have that same problem with men.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, you are comfortable with what you know, and what you don't know, you don't, maybe you don't want to portray it a certain way, because, you can go down the line of, if you're a guy, you can DM, guys all day long, but when you DM a girl, do you actually, DM them properly, or you roleplay them properly, or do you do them a disservice and it's even worse?
Yeah. I definitely feel that when I'm dealing with Esmeralda, I'm constantly thinking, am I doing something wrong here? Am I
Yeah,
doing the original people, the Vistana, were based off of wrong here?
I mean that once again, that's a whole nother topic too of racist
Yikes.
depictions of a Romani. You know that's a whole nother thing. Um, but I mean, Curse of Strahd is baked into the history of D&D. It comes from I6 Ravenloft, which was made oh so long ago. And back then, there were
Yes.
certain motifs and ideas that were perfectly acceptable for the day, which are no longer acceptable in today's society.
Yeah,
And
reading through original Ravenloft for Ireena, just looking at any time they mentioned a member of the Vistana, I don't think many people realize how bad it was.
oh yeah,
They straight up used the G word as the only word to describe them.
yeah.
Vistana did not exist.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I mean, you can't change the past. You can only change the future.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so you mentioned, obviously, back then, the module had different ideas and motifs. Has Ireena changed over time, over the course of all these different editions of D&D?
So the different editions, I personally have only looked at things that I can actually get my hands on, and that is the Ravenloft things. That's the only thing I could really find as a reference when I've been doing all my research. So just a disclaimer, I'm only looking at the original Ravenloft module,
Mm-hmm.
but they are very similar and almost too similar. If you don't mind, I would like to read the first line of Introduction for Ireena, just to actually show the difference that I think having Lucy be one of the game designers on it.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get it out.
Yeah, and as you're getting that out, it's something important to point out that, of course, the first edition we had I6 Ravenloft, which was just the village of Barovia, the Vistani camp, and then the castle,
Yeah.
and that was the entirety of the adventure. Your player show up to the village of Barovia, talk to a few people, then march up to the castle. That's the end of the story. In fact, it was
Yeah.
regularly ran as a one shot. But over the course of time, of course, Ravenloft got expanded and expanded, and in second edition in particular, it got super duper expanded. The huge, big old lands of the mist of the entirety of the domain of Dread, just huge, right? Like just massive areas, tons of viscounts and other rulers, tons of towns, tons of locations, and then eventually, it's funny, we see that first edition super small, second and third edition exploded out, and then we go all the way back to fifth edition where it shrunk down to a pretty
Yes.
significantly small portion.
So just a reminder of the mild and strong-willed sauce description of Irina's personality. This is the original Irina's personality. Ireena is a sweet but troubled woman, although she may not be fir although she may at first appear mild, she is strong-willed and a good arm, but no means a hapless victim. She will aid the party as best she can in saving herself. That that first sentence says a lot about Ireena as a person. I don't know why that wasn't added in.
Yeah.
It's like she's sweet but troubled. Perfect. She's strong-willed and good with an arm. We
They
understand what strong-willed means.
they should have kept that and removed the mild part. Because I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever described another human being as mild. That's just me. Maybe some people do. Maybe that was a thing, but I personally wouldn't. It is very important to consider the transformation that Ireena has gotten over the years in regards of her impact on the story and what she's doing, and of course how to describe her because literally just a single sentence. Something I always recommend for all NPCs is just a single sentence about their character that will
Yes.
easily influence your role playing and decision making for that character.
Yes. I'm glad you brought up the length of the original Ravenloft version because I was going to bring that up as well.
Yeah.
But while you talk about that, when bringing Curse of Strahd and expanding on the village of Barovia, every single character, other than Bildrath, the mercantile owner, has some expanded personality segment. Ishmark has an entire section where the lesser title is explained more. Father Donovich has the entirety of the Juru subplot, which is great, don't get me wrong. But Ireena still has that one line of dialogue, that one sentence, that is less than the original version. Why was she not more expanded on? And I don't think Isaac is a good expansion of her character because that expands on someone completely different than herself. We don't learn what Ireena's reaction is in Raw to Isaac. It's sort of just, I'm kidnapped by Isaac now.
Which is unfortunate because, yeah, we keep on seeing these things of, outside factors influencing Ireena, and Ireena doesn't react at all. We just basically get people reacting to Ireena, which, once again, it tells us weird story building of all these people in Curse of Strahd, 5e. We get all these characters that are all, somehow connected or tied to Ireena, and yet it feels like Ireena isn't tied to anyone, which is this weird position to be in. She seems to be the center of this small universe, and yet she has no clue why that is, at least early on. And that's another thing I wanted to go over is, she has all these ties to all these people and all this land of Barovia. And, she has this huge impact on the story. Do you think that Curse of Strahd actually works as a module if you just straight up remove Ireena?
See, that's an interesting question. I think it does not work as well because, as I mentioned before, I think she's such an important character because she is sending the party to Vallaki for a good reason. Ismark isn't telling them, hey, deliver this gold. She's saying, I need you to take this person to safety. That is like an immediate threat acknowledgement. And I feel like if Ireena didn't exist, Strahd wouldn't be out. That the module just straight up said Strahd sleeps as he waits for the new Ireena. There's no if Ireena did not exist in the module, Van Richten would have already gone and staked him in his coffin. She's important to why Strahd is doing this. She's an important factor in guiding the party to different locations. She helps expand on the backstory. Like, the party isn't going to care about Tatiana if they're not like, oh, wait, Ireena is Tatiana? Whoa, plot twist.
And mind you, that is something very interesting to note is, your players, of course, if they're, in the village of Barovia, go over to Vallaki, they keep on discovering that, people are just connected to Ireena. And then eventually they discover that Tatiana and Ireena are one and the same, and they may see that coming because they think, oh, Ireena is this all-encompassing important person. But, something else to consider is, like all NPCs, like all PCs, like anything that has stats in a D&D game, they can die. As per mentioned, in good old Dice Camera Action, unfortunately, Ireena died. And that was totally because of one of the PCs, but that was totally an accident. But it can happen. Strahd goes out of his way to not allow anything bad to happen to Ireena, but sometimes bad things just happen. Sometimes Ireena just falls, 20 feet, and then, unfortunately, it starts bleeding out, and your players can't do anything about it. Sometimes your players accidentally do an AoE and hit her. Sometimes she triggers the trap, and, something bad happens. So what happens if she dies?
So if she dies, oh boy. No, I'm kidding. No, that's not it. It's really dependent on how you're going to run Strahd, because if she dies, yeah, he's gonna be mad about it. But if Strahd's someone who's just gonna wait for the next Tatiana, He's just gonna be mad at the party and try and kill them, and then wait for the next Tatiana. Because Ireena to him is an object. It's just it's like a flower that's gonna bloom. And when the flower dies, it's just gonna go back into the ground and start growing again.
Yeah, and
So I say however you're gonna run your Strahd is how he should react to that. But Strahd shouldn't be the only person to react to that. Like Ishmark still exists. Even if you denounce his character, he still exists. Someone in the party had to tell Ishmark what happened. And that can be one of the greatest moments in the campaign of them going, hey, so guess what happened?
so Ireena went to go open this door in this attic, and then she exploded. We don't know what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my players almost killed Ireena, and that player who almost killed her, messaged me and said, I am working on my message to Ishmark right now. Uh, the wagon, by the way, blew up.
Yep.
They did that.
There's a lot of fun or not so fun tales about NPCs getting killed by sticky fingered characters trying to open up the wagon. So depending on when this happens, where this happens, why this happens, will have a extremely significant impact on Strahd's relationship with the party, Ismark's relationship, heck, maybe even Ezek's, depending on what's going on with that whole situation.
Oh, yes, but the psychopath who wanted to protect his sister finds out that the party is dead. That's perfect straw manipulation material.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks. Like whenever any character always dies, that is the end of one chapter, but it's always the beginning of something new, right? Ireena dying would suck, but there's so much of a catalyst of adventures that you could go ahead and spring from that. I wouldn't recommend pushing Ireena to die, but if she dies, she dies.
Yeah, one thing I'll give the module credit for is the fact that no one else attacks Ireena as a like the other monsters don't. That means if Ireena ever dies, it is directly the party's fault. That is the most gothic horror thing I've heard in a while. You being the cause of killing the thing you were supposed to protect.
It's like, Strahd, please, no. Ireena just went to go, climb on some scaffolding near the tower. I swear. Please, don't kill me. And, you can, there's always those sad stories of Ireena getting killed because of some environmental thing or something else, but...
The bad bar stories of how did you kill Ireena?
Yep, there's a lot of those floating around, and it sucks because... But another fun thing that can, of course, come from that is death isn't always the end, because your players could try and resurrect her through the abbot. That could always have some fun implications there, because the abbot's got his whole motivation of wanting Strahd to be happy, and there's a lot of fun things you can do with that, or not so fun things, I guess.
Yeah, my request, if you're going to bring Ireena to the abbot, they better not leave her body with the abbot, because if they do, that is your sign as the DM that they have not learned anything. And have him make her a flesh golem. And then see how mad Strahd is after that.
Vasilka 2.0.
Just like the abbot, when he sees Ireena dead body walk through the door, I don't need you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of monkey's paw things you can do with that for sure. I think that can be an absolute blast. But another thing to consider is whether she dies or not. Going back to the very beginning, she has this personality, she's got this character, she's got all this stuff, and as you mentioned, it sounded like pretty early on that your players did something to peeve her. What if your players show up to the land of Barovia and are such dickheads or such assholes that they are completely unlikable, and Ismark and Ireena both come to consensus that they should not put their faith and trust and lives into these people. What happens if Ireena does not join or get along with the party?
That is an interesting that's an interesting question because I know it has happened at some point.
Oh
This
yes.
module's been run enough. I am sure a DM is getting flashbacks right now. So, what you can do is you can kind of just have Ireena and Ishmar go to Vallaki anyway. Have them go to Vallaki. Have the party. Have them follow at a distance as not to be associated with. And you can still have the things happen with Isaac, but it's kind of uncomfortably in the background. Be like, oh man, where's Isaac been these past couple of days? He hasn't been doing his guard duty lately. Hey, where's that burgomaster of Barovia god? Where is he at? Where'd he go? And then the party uh, is probably asked to kill Ishmark. I mean, not Ishmark, Isaac. They both start with an I. What am I kidding? They all start with an I.
All those I characters that are related to Ireena, they're all the same.
Yeah. And the party would probably be so down to kill Isaac, and then they go into his room and see Ireena probably tied up in a bed, just going, well, I guess we should have went with her.
But once again, that will be very telling of the kind of players and PCs that you have. If you have it where they show up and they're complete assholes, and Ireena and Ismark do not join them, then you can have that be background setting where they just happen to see them from across the hall, like not the hall, but across the town in the village. And then maybe even like at some point, they see Izek literally dragging Ireena away. And if once again they don't act on that, then that is very, very telling of the people that you have at your table.
At that point, it's sort of sending a message to your party that the world is gonna keep moving without you.
Yeah.
It's not just gonna stop moving because you didn't take the side quest. This isn't Skyrim.
Absolutely. You can only get so many quests that basically hinge on you being at the right place at the right time. It is very important, and that is one thing that Vallaki excels at. There is multiple quests and instances where it states, okay, after this many days, this happens. And that's something very important to consider is how does Ireena, whether she be in the foreground or in the background, how does she influence the whole timeline of the game that you're telling?
Yeah, that's why I say before that she's so important, because Ireena, as mild and and strong-willed, she's still gonna do it. Like, she's probably still gonna take her father to the church and run away from Duru because Ishmark and Ireena with their stat blocks can't fight a vampire spawn. Maybe
Absolutely.
Ishmark, but that's not fun.
Well, I mean, statistically on paper, there's no one that'd be able to deal with vampire spawn because they do have damage, and then of course, the vampires regenning the whole time, so it'd just be bad news bears all around. So, speaking of that, and in regards of playing up Ireena, something you just mentioned is the stat block. That stat block is a pretty significant deal because, at first level, yeah, Ireena is completely on par with the party. But after second level and beyond, it quickly becomes apparent that the noble stat block that she has is nowhere near comparable to the party. So, do we evolve the stat block over time? Do we change things up right from the get-go? Do we keep it as is forever and all time? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I feel like this depends if you're running warrior or speaker Ireena. And I think Speaker Ireena can work with the noble stat block. I recommend giving her inspiration or another charisma based ability. But there's a fun little book you might have heard of called Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and they actually made the Unearthed Arcana sidekick system canon. So I recommend using that for Ireena. Another thing people like to use with Ireena that's very simple is just swapping her and Ishmark's stat blocks. Because Ishmark is not holding a sword in his art, so he probably doesn't have as good of a stat block as the girl who's holding a sword in her art and wearing breastplate.
That is
No,
something
sorry,
very important to
wrong
consider.
assumption.
That is something to consider. Is you never judge a book by its cover, but every human being judges a book by its cover. That art of Ireena, we do get the image that she's a badass,
It's
and
a striking piece of art.
yeah, it's a badass piece of art. But of course, when you look at that art and you think to yourself, okay, she's like a warrior. She's she's holding her own. And once again, at first level, yeah, she is comparable to another PC. But everything beyond that is nowhere near as good.
Yeah,
So
I see the art as kind of having a double meaning of she can fight, but she's also looking at the sword in an almost reluctant and hesitant way. Like she can use it. That's what I love about that art. It can mean two different sides of Ireena, but she should at least be able to use a sword competently.
yeah, and to compare her to a commoner, the commoner only having 4 HP and only a plus like what 2 or 3 to hit. She is far superior to the average person. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, in today's day and age, in fifth edition in particular, your characters get so insanely powerful so insanely quickly that they quickly overshadow her. Which, depending on the type of story that you're telling, can be perfectly fine. I think that is
Yeah.
a very simple air quote fix is just making her the stat block of something higher than a noble, such as the scouts or the knight or veteran. All these different ones.
Yeah.
They can certainly prove to be interesting, giving her some bardic inspiration, giving her some fun little tidbits, making her in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. We get the idea of the expert, the warrior, and then the caster.
Yeah.
Those can definitely be a lot of fun things as well.
Yeah. There's also this really fun mini arc you can have if you're running Warrior Ireena where she starts learning like holy magic
Hmm.
and she could become a very good healer if the party does not have one. And that's where my Ireena in my game has shined because our paladin and Asimar like holy magic barbarian both died. So she is kind of stepped up as the holy healer person. And that's good because she can probably have more connection to Father Donovich in that way, and then Father Lucian in that way. And just having a connection to the Morning Lord for the DMPC is interesting as we learn more about it and we meet the abbot. Quote unquote, I'm here to speak for the Morning Lord.
Yeah, and I think there's a very fun. Yeah, like you said, I think there's a very fun arc of that training montage of she grew up learning a little bit about being a cleric, and then when she moves to Vallaki, she learns a little bit more, and then when she goes over to the abbot, there could be that crisis of faith where everything she's built up on and hoped and believe comes crashing down when she discovers the truth behind this near angelic being, succumbing to the darkness all around. And that can be an absolute fantastic motivation and reveal of the world that surrounds and permeates all around the land of Barovia.
And speaking onto the training montage, a really good Ireena change of the stat block is having your party actively like help her out.
Yeah.
Maybe she's like, "Hey, gunslinger, you have a gun. What is that? What is
Yeah.
that? And can you teach me how to use it?"
Yeah, that's something I push into practically every game that I run these days is but typically by the time they get to a higher level, then all of a sudden someone shows up and says, "Hey, I want to be an adventurer just like you. Can you teach me?" And I think that is something that you can have right from the get-go where Ireena joins the party and you could have it where Ireena basically only sparred with her brother and that's the only training she's ever received. But then she looks around and she says, "Hey, maybe one of you guys can teach me." And she looks around and sees the ranger and she says, "Hey, maybe I want to use a bow. Can you go ahead and tell me how to use it?" She sees the paladin and says, "Hey, you use the divine magic in your own, imbued power and expound it out. Can you go ahead and teach me that? She sees the bard and says, hey, maybe I want to bring some life to this land. Can you teach me how to play music? There's a lot of amazing things you can do with that. And also another fun mini game with that is you could have the players literally fight each other over, who is going to be the one to, basically train her up in a class. And depending on the group that you have, they can certainly be like, oh, maybe she should be like, so and so. Maybe she should be a healer. Maybe she should be a support. Maybe she should be a frontline tank. And then you can have the other group of people being like, no, I want to teach her. No, I want to teach her. So I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
great things you can do with that. Yeah, so in addition to changing the stat block, something that we should sit down and consider as well is what is she willing to do? Does she recognize her own strengths and weaknesses? Does she know that she is being protected by the land right from the get-go? Does she know, like, what does she know and what is she willing to do?
Yeah, harkening back to the stat block for a second, I have something I do with my Ireena, which is very homebrew. And so my version of Ireena starts sort of getting these past memories of other versions of Tatiana. And as she like gains more about those memories, she gains the ability to basically for a minute allow that soul to take control of her body basically and use her body as a vessel to use magic. So one of these is actually Vargas's mother, and that's the first one she finds out about. And she's this cool wizard. So it's a way for Ireena to still be Ireena, while also learning more about her past and having this arc of feeling like maybe I'm just one of Tatiana's vessels. Maybe I don't matter at all. But of course, the players go, no, we care about you, Ireena. And also, you have a cool wizard inside of you that can cast Fireball. It's just Victor's stat block again because it makes sense. But it's an interesting dynamic that you can do. I like to call this Ireena Avatar Ireena for very obvious reasons. Yeah, look, there's a couple of them that are interesting. There's a Berserker Tatiana reincarnation that when she died challenged Strahd to a death match. And it's a cool way to also show the party of, wow, Strahd has tried over and over again, and he's not gonna stop with Ireena. It helps build that tension, that fear.
Yeah, I mean, so in the book, we only get information regarding two other reincarnations. That's pretty much it, right? So, but we can obviously assume that that Tatiana's spirit has inhabited many different forms over the course of 400 years. That's a lot to live. And we also probably suspect that Barovians only live to be around like 60 or 80 anyway. So there's probably a pretty decent turnover rate.
Yeah, it's that version of Ireena can also help with exposition explaining from the other characters. Like the Were Ravens aren't going to just straight up go, here's our entire history of our organization. But by having Ireena have a past self that used to be a Were Raven, she can go, oh, I know about this. In fact, this version of Tatiana helped build the Were Ravens as to what they are today. And just give her agency in Barovia's past.
Yeah, which is interesting because, as your players are meandering about this place, yeah, they'll see that this place has been frozen in time, but they really don't get a sense of the history of the world. The only thing that they truly understand is, this place has been locked away for 400 years, and you're just another group of adventurers, and that's pretty much it. So I think it is important to, in certain places, divulge some history located about the land because, there really isn't that much info to be given out. And another thing is, what is so yeah, we talked about basically like Ireena
Yeah.
getting this information and whether she divulges it or not, and changing up her stat block. But yeah, so what is she willing to do? Do you think? Do you think that she is willing to go up against all the horrors and atrocities of this land again and again? Is she willing to go to high and low places? Is she willing to go to Castle Ravenloft itself?
One of the only good aspects of Irina's personality sentence is when they say that she's going to help the party, but also like keep her distance to protect herself. I think it's something along those lines. So I, Ireena, first and foremost, is a survivor, the icon of the Destiny's Child song. She's gonna help the party, but keep her distance, and maybe as the connection grows, show her rely on the party more. Maybe she doesn't take a shot at the guy right next to her because she knows she has faith that the rest of her party members are going to take it out. And at that point, if they've grown to that level where, yeah, Ireena will help you, even though they're not, that's what I think is such an important moment. When the party starts to actually defend Ireena, knowing she's not going to get hit, but protecting her because they want to. That's a great moment of characterization that the players don't even realize they're doing half the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a good feeling to use the strength that you have to do good, or at least as much as you can. And even if they do have this understanding that Ireena is air quo safe, still doing your damnedest to try and prevent any sort of harm from befalling a friend is a very powerful moment. But something I want to talk about is, of course, your players can try their damnedest. They can fight against the
Yes.
teeming hordes. They can stave off the undead and all the abominations that surround this land. They can go up against the hordes of also people and monsters and whatever else. But maybe your players just aren't good enough at their job. What happens if Strahd takes her?
So I feel this is entirely dependent on how human the DMs makes the spawns. Because I personally make the Strahds are very human, yes. The spawns have emotions because it's boring to play a character like that. Like the abbot is fun for that character because I don't have to play him that often. I don't want to play all four of the spawns as being completely emotionless. But Ireena, this is gonna reveal how much anime I've watched. I have this plan for a sort of Ireena corruption arc to happen if she gets turned into a vampire spawn, and she's calling out the party's faults to them and saying how I no longer need you or Isaac or Ishmar to protect me. I now have the power to fight, but only Strahd can protect me as well. I can still be a woman, but Strahd can protect me as well. And another thing you can do with Ireena being a vampire spawn is having her be perfectly in love with Strahd, that it's terrifying. It's the best thing I can tell DMs to do if they're gonna run that version of Ireena is go into the book, go to the Vallaki section, and read up how they describe Lydia Petrovna, Vargas's wife, because there is something going on there that I don't even want to talk about.
Once again, that's another topic for another day.
But I think one of the most terrifying is having her act exactly like Tatiana, which is for DMs asking how does Tatiana act? I'm asking that question too. But she should act completely different to how you've been portraying Ireena so far. In the implication there being that Strahd is making her act like Tatiana. She's putting on a performance of Tatiana. And that can help the party get to know Tatiana in a very sick, twisted way.
Especially if they've been palling around with Ireena this whole time. They've been friends with this person for so long, and then all of a sudden they see her in an undead gaze. But when they go to talk to her, it's not the Ireena that they knew. It is in its separate entity. And there could of course be similarities between their you know thoughts and feelings and how they portray themselves, but they aren't the same person. Like, they just aren't. They grew up in different circumstances. They had different ideals and thoughts and bonds, motivations, and of course, there is that aspect of, does she, what is her relationship now with the party? Is she on amicable terms? Is she gonna turn on the party? What's she gonna do? Something I always advocate for my campaigns and any Curse of Strahd campaign is a wedding at Ravenloft, because Strahd could just go ahead and grab her and that's the end of story. But making it a spectacle is badass. Inviting everyone to Castle Ravenloft and just having a grand old time, making the players be, the best man or the best woman, everything else. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Alternatively, you can pull a I need a hero segment from
Once again,
Shrek 2.
are you implying that Curse of Strahd is
How,
literally just Shrek and Shrek 2?
how many times have I referenced Shrek in this video? Not
Ireena's just
enough,
an
honestly.
ogre because she has layers. I object. You could have Curse of Strahd is literally just Shrek. Easy
Yeah,
peasy.
the wedding scene is fun because it's not an automatic lose, which is that is gothic horror? No, but do we care? No.
No, I find that with today's day and age, the idea of Gothic horror is this renaissance, right? Where, like, it was popular for a time, not popular, popular, not popular. I don't know where we're at, culturally right now. I feel like we're probably going into a lull of not liking it. So, do as you may, do as you will. But, at the end of the day, just make sure that you're presenting the best story to your players. I personally find that, just having Strahd be so audacious as to invite everyone to a wedding
Yeah.
where he turns her in front of everyone, I think that, like, is like a big old power play. And of
And
course,
it also works for the gothic horror setting of because gothic horror is a lot of things, but it's also watching characters be defeated through their own flaws. And so him, through his hubris, being defeated like that is a very good character detail. Like, cause I could just do this normally. I'm gonna make a show out of it. In fact, I'm gonna have the Celestial be the man officiating the wedding. No one's gonna stop this. It creates a good final battle moment too.
yeah. Like, you have all of Strahd's agents and everything else, and then, Strahd whisked Ireena away, and then you got to fight through the hordes, climb up the tower, try and do whatever it takes. But it may not necessarily be the end, because your players might have to retreat, or they might get beat up, and, do whatever else. What happens when she is a vampire spawn? Does indeed, and if this were a video game, a lot of people would probably see a end screen if Ireena, we see this cut screen of cutscene of Ireena getting bitten, and then she turns into a vampire spawn. She looks at the camera, and then it just says game over. But we don't do that in D&D,
Yeah.
right? We play things out. So what does Ireena do as a vampire spawn?
Well, I feel like so there's some people who play Ireena that she won't even let herself become a vampire spawn. Like there is a way you can play Ireena, which is definitely a thing you can have Ireena do if she doesn't want to be a vampire spawn. I'm going to assume people are smart enough to realize what I'm implying here. That's very similar to what Tatiana did.
Yeah.
That's something that can happen, but it all depends on how you're playing her and how you're rationalizing her choices of would she do that or would she have faith in the party? But if she is a vampire spawn, she might be put it. Depending on your strat again, is he gonna immediately put her in the crypts again? Is he gonna like have her around for a bit? he paints another picture of Tatiana.
He starts showing her off to all the other brides and be like, "This is what I wanted, not you."
A bride uprising.
And then of course the best wife shows up and then puts a stop to all the. There's a lot of fun dynamics you can have with that, where there is you can have the cast of Castle Ravenloft, strike up and say, "Oh, screw this Strahd guy," he just
Yeah.
used us. And yeah, so in regards of that, the idea of whether she tries to she does everything in her power to not become a vampire spawn, or she can't change fate and she gets turned. That can lead down to an excellent rabbit hole of does she get some redemption? Does she get this and that? But no matter what way you go down the track here, whether she survives the whole journey and, does this and that, or she gets grabbed and transformed, is there ever a happy ending for Ireena in this campaign?
So, I feel like we all know the ending that I'm about to talk about because it is the most controversial thing on the subreddit because
Oh,
everyone hates it.
there's a lot of controversies there, but
Okay, that's fair. I forget about the monthly art debate. Uh, the Sergei ending is something a lot of people vocally hate, which, for good reason, I understand it. I hated it too, but I don't hate it as much. Now, the ending involves Ireena going and being with Sergei, and the book describes it as her gaining her memories back. And there's this line in it that I think people forget, and it's her going, I am Ireena Kolyana, but in my past I was Sergei's beloved Tatiana.
I,
There's a
I'm
there's a
not Tatiana.
misconception.
I'm Sergei's beloved. That is huge. That is.
Yes,
Oh.
that is there's a big misconception that Tatiana's like taking control of her soul, or like she's not she's like being controlled by Tatiana. No, she is, as Ireena, saying, "I this is who I am, and I'm making this choice." And there's something else about this ending that many people don't realize. In that raw, hey, Twisbit, listen up here. I'm reading raw off the text. This optional scene can be used after Strahd has been defeated. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. It's an optional scene. But that's interesting. Very interesting. Because I think the big hatred of that scene comes from how Kresk deals with this scene, which is not optional at all. And that's because the book is trying to give you a reason not to let her go to Kresk. Like in Valaki, the consequence to taking her there was Isaac. But in Kresk, the consequence of taking her there is the pool scene. And it's a much different vibe. It's a very different vibe. Like her entire body language changes. She like starts talking as weird Tatiana form, and she runs towards the water. And the way it's read, I can understand many people going, I don't want her to go there. Because at this point, the party has been shown visions by Strahd of evil things. The gallows is an example. The flesh golem made of their body parts in the Abbey in Kresk is an example. I can see why a party would read that as, oh, this is a trick by Strahd. This obviously isn't Sergei. This is a trick by Strahd. We need to stop Ireena from going there. But the module had like Ireena crying after that. So it's a very bad. It doesn't portray the point that the original ending does of I'm making this choice for myself as Ireena.
it's tough because especially if your players have grown a really fond attachment to this character, they're not going to just one let them fall into any random person's hands that just shows up. Because they might get the implication that that's totally Strahd and she charmed Ireena. We got to stop it. And that's also telling of the module in itself that of the the whole 2 paragraphs in total that we get on Ireena. One of them includes, oh yeah, she cries if you don't let her do this, right? You know, uh,
Yeah.
but the thing is it's tough because on paper, as written, your players could get to Kresk extremely early, and then just Ireena is gone for a big chunk of the campaign. That's theoretically possible. It really comes down to the game that you're running and all that. But more importantly is the fact that your players may not know who Sergei is. Depending on the pieces of information that they've picked up, they may not understand who Ireena is. They may not understand who Sergei is. They may not understand Strahd's relationship to Ireena, and they don't understand these things. So having the story just end right there, outside of their control, could certainly leave a bad taste in some people's mouths.
Yeah, I it's interesting you bring that up because I actually turned to the Kresk page real quick, and the way she talks here is like when an anime character at the finale is trying to explain the exposition very quickly. It's my beloved Sergei, in life you were a prince and a man of faith.
Yeah.
We were married long ago. Has this blessed pool called your spirit to me? They're like, wait, Ireena, you're giving us too much information. The book is info overloading them to the point when they realize that Ireena's about to go into the pool, that it's death. Like, we don't know who this person is. Why are you acting like that?
Yeah, I find that's always that always comes up in writing, right? Like, oh hey brother, are we gonna go to that one place today that we talked about previously? That writing creeps up all the time, and exposition is tough. Depending on the circumstances. Specifically for these modules in particular, they write them with the thought that your players may not have picked up on everything, and that's why they try to give us this exposition dump. But exposition dumps, at the last second, and then all of a sudden them disappearing, it's not exactly the ideal I find with a lot of people. But once again, entirely depends on the party that you have, the relationship and rapport that they have with Ireena, the understanding of Tatiana, knowing who Sergei is, knowing Strahd's connection to everything in between. There
Yeah.
is a lot of things to consider, and if they don't know any of that, then yeah, it's
Yeah.
not a
Just
happy ending for your players.
yeah. Quickly overviewing the Sergei and Ireena ending in the epilogue is very much it's called Sergei and Ireena, not Sergei and Tatiana, because it's not Sergei and Tatiana, it's Sergei and Ireena. Ireena says she's choosing this for herself. She's choosing to be with Sergei after learning everything about him. But
Yeah,
something blue comes off as she's being mind controlled or she's doing this just on a whim. They, to fix something blue, you need to have that speech of her going, I'm Ireena Kolyana. I remember my memories. Let me go be with my lover. Okay, peace.
yeah. It's really tough because you do have to reconcile with not only yourself but even your players. There's a huge philosophical discussion of what is the soul, who are you. Those are very big, important questions which you can sit there and ponder for eons to come. But is Ireena a different entity than Tatiana? Are they one and the same? Like, it's tough. You do have to sit down and discover what that is because you're gonna want an answer to that so you can role play it up to the best of your ability. But your players are gonna want to know that answer too. Is Ireena and Tatiana just the same person? But like it sucks. Like the book does not give us an answer on that regard. You have to sort of
You it
drum that up your
does
own. Huh?
because she essentially acts like a different person when she gets Tatiana's memories.
Yeah, and that sucks because in that regard, right? It sucks because you've known Ireena this whole time, and then it feels as if Ireena's being like erased. Which that certainly fits in the God of the Core theme of knowing someone for
Mhm.
so long and then them just disappearing like that. But once again, that entirely you play it up to your players. Do you think that they'll accept the fact that Ireena is gone, or do you think that they'll not be happy about that?
Yeah. But so let's say the crest scene doesn't happen and you decide not to run Irina's scene at the pool. There's a lot you can do. Maybe Ishmark realizes that, yo, my sis is cool. Maybe she should be the new burgomaster. Or she decides, I'm gonna go explore. I'm gonna go leave Barovia. That's a way that she can be happy and also not deal with Strahd when he comes back. Because that's something that happens in the book. Even if Ireena does not go off with Sergei, Strahd's still gonna come back and get Ireena and chase her again.
Yeah, and depending on the kind of game world that you're building, that can always have fun future implications of, Barovia was just one of Strahd's domains. Maybe the domain of Dread slowly creeps around and moves all over the place, and maybe that has some future consequences, and who knows what else can happen there. Maybe Ireena joins that party's the adventuring party and goes off to some fantastical places and does amazing things at some point. And whatever the case may be, whether Ireena, is tied to the land, Ireena just disappears, and Tatiana becomes one with Sergei in the afterlife, and their souls are freed. There's a lot of different ways you can go ahead and handle that. I don't know if there's any one happy ending, and I don't know if it should be a happy ending or not. I think it should be sort. I mean, in my mind, it should
Yeah.
be a bittersweet moment for sure. But you know, once again, temper the expectations of the campaign with what you believe is right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, coming up here at the end is do you have anything you want to get off of your and talk about here about Ireena?
She's the queen.
Not just
But
any queen, she's the queen.
she's the queen. She's Queena. Oh, that was so bad. That was so bad. But I want to specifically talk about how connected Tatiana and Strahd seem. Because the first time I read through the module, there was this overwhelming sense that Tatiana and Strahd, one cannot live without the other in Ravenloft. It's sort of like a cat and mouse game. You know, Tatiana's death is what caused him to be in sorrow forever, and he became a vampire to get to her. And she sort of fell into the mist. The book does not do a good job of explaining how the mist was formed. Was it after Sergei was killed? Did Tatiana create the mist when she died? That's an interesting one to play with. But this cat and mouse game is something that throughout all of the book, and I say this in a Twitter thread about Dragna Carta's post and Ireena, but the module should really just be called Strahd, The Curse of Strahd and Tatiana, because that's what it is. It's these two souls constantly being put in through tragedy. And really the only way to save through that story is her being with Sergei. It's the yin and yang theme almost between Tatiana and Strahd. One cannot live without the other.
Yeah, and I mean it's sad. I mean, maybe not sad, but like we understand the whole history right from the get go between
Yeah.
Strahd and Tatiana and Sergei and all that, and we see this back and forth between, their souls and the things that they've done, and, the whole idea behind Strahd being entrapped in his own prison that he can control, but there's just the one thing that he wants to control he can't. And
Yeah.
this theme of your players trying to stand up against this, it's hammered right from the get-go that they stand no chance, because they can see the marks of the dead and then see all the thousands of other adventurers just like them. It's undoubtedly many of those adventurers, tried helping out another reincarnation of Tatiana at some point, but they failed. And what makes your characters, what makes your player succeed over all those others, and what makes Tatiana's fate any different this time, is truly the crux of this whole adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we went over some really important stuff to consider with Ireena, because, like we said before, very, very important, influential character in this whole damn campaign that we get 2 paragraphs on in this whole freaking book. She certainly can be a tremendous impact on the campaign, depending on how you run her, or she could just be practically non-existent. Either way, I think that her inclusion in the campaign, and most important of all, her portrayal in the campaign, will certainly give you an excellent campaign, because Curse of Strahd is regarded as one of the best 5th edition modules, and we can see that clearly because of the active Discord, the subreddit,
Yes.
and the fact that, the fans are just fanatical about this. I think that Ireena has, we've of course heard many horror stories about things that have happened to Ireena, and of course we've heard some amazing tales that come out from Ireena's inclusion. So I highly recommend that you do her justice, you do her right, and you make it so that she is a influential being, whether you portray her as one thing or another. Something we see all the time is gender bends, gender swap Ireena, gender swap Ismark, gender swap Strahd, do this and that. Whatever you do, those are perfectly fine. Make the character awesome. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah. One last thing I'd like to touch on is, so let's say for a second that you still want to have the mist be free of Strahd's control. So one very simple way we can do that is by introducing Sergei. So what I intend to do, and I hope none of my players are listening to this.
They better not be.
They better not be. Boy, if you are listening, you're getting a negative DM inspiration die. So Sergei, I have actually been reincarnated as Duru. And that's why Strahd makes him a vampire and does all the interesting things.
I like it.
And one thing that can end the campaign is Duru, at the end of the campaign, going, I'm Sergei. My death brought about the mist, so I have to die in order for that to happen. And my players have a little bit of a connection to Duru, so I think that works just as well with him and Ireena. And he's also her childhood friend, so it's I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this for you, boo. Yeah.
And that'll be really sad if they have both a rapport with Ireena and Doru. Then knowing that they have to kill Doru, right there at the epic, finale, will be a very, very tragic moment. And that killing Doru is in fact pretty much similar to what Strahd did, forming a pact, except but the opposite being it's good.
Around.
Yeah, so there's amazing symbolism you can do with that, and of course, the Ireena's connection to Doru, if they are childhood friends, and maybe even if they were teens, they maybe had some sort of flirting romance going on or something in that regard. There's always that possibility. Yeah, I think that's an absolute amazing inclusion to have in this amazing campaign. So, yeah, we could talk about Ireena for the next 27 hours, but unfortunately, no one's got the time for that. I mean, no one is in regards to the viewers. Me and Strawberry could, of course, talk about that for ages to come.
Of course.
So that is we're gonna leave it up to there. That is gonna do it for us. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to Strawberry for putting up with talking to me for this long.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say at the finale here?
Uh, Final notes. Lesbian Ireena is valid, and Serena, hope you get it.
Absolutely. That is going to do it for us. Thank you so very much for listening, and I can't wait to see you all in the next one.
Bye, memers.